Hey everybody, we're live. This is a midday edition of Behind the Bits podcast. I do want to say I appreciate you folks either watching this live or watching the replay on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or wherever I post it. I'm seeing a lot more people watching the video version, and to be totally honest, I don't really like doing video because I don't like to see myself on screen. But hey, if you're watching it, I appreciate it, and just keep doing it. But also remember that Scott gets paid on the audio. So if you watch the video and you like it, just real quick whip out your phone and download the audio version too. I'd appreciate that. This week's episode came out yesterday, and it's Johnny Beaner. I peruse different apps and YouTube and stuff like that, and just look for people that I like. And Johnny Beaner did a dry bar special recently, and just loved it. I totally recommend watching his special if you want to see a very good comic mechanic. This guy really puts the tags together properly. His setups are fantastic. His misdirects are just beautiful. I really enjoyed his dry bar, and we had a real good talk about that. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, that one is out on all the apps, and I appreciate you listening. And I wanted to let you guys know that we are going to be moving soon, so I may miss a week or two. And I've got a few stacked up, but uh, that's going to happen here in the next few weeks. But I do also want to announce that the BTB Internet Talk Show is going to come back, but it's going to be on Mondays, and that's going to start in February. And I don't think I'm going to do every week. I think I might do every other week. So that's coming back. So stay tuned for that. And I'm gonna see if I can get a co-host. But anyhow, let's get right to it. I am. This is one of the guys I wanted to talk to when I started the podcast, and he is my 98th interview. So, sometimes it takes a while, but he was really busy being mayor of Hillsboro, Ohio, and tending a farm. During the time I started the podcast. And so I kind of let him do his thing, but he's got a book coming out, and this is going to be released on February 1st, which is the day you're going to be listening to the audio of this. It's called Chasing Drew Hastings, a memoir. And I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of that and read it. Stayed up late for quite a few nights and read it. The neat thing about an advance copy now is all you got to do is send an email attachment. You don't have to use the mail or anything like that. It's just an email attachment, and I read it on my phone. But Drew Hastings is here, and I'm going to do a nicer intro to him when I do the audio version. But I just want to bring him out and start talking about the book because this is a really, really good book. Drew,
how are you?
Thanks so much for being on the show. This is a really good moment for me. You're one of the comedians that kind of shaped my own comedy that I didn't start until I was in my 50s. And this was a really I really like the fact that you really started another life in your 50s and did so well with it, because that gives me hope that I can actually be a decent comedian someday. So I really, really enjoyed that. And folks, if you are watching live, I know there's a few of you watching live. I am going to put in the chat a few times during this. I am going to put the link to pre-order Chasing Drew Hastings from Amazon, so you can go right there and pre-order, and that way it'll show up in your Kindle, or you can get the hardback or paperback, or however it comes. as soon as it gets shipped out. So that's going to go up a few times during the conversation. Drew, as I told you, I had planned on reading part of the book before we talked,
Mhm.
and the problem was it was so engaging, and I got into it so much that I just read the whole damn thing. And
Thank
it
you.
was I really appreciated the honesty of the book. It was a very honest book about your life, and it's not just comedy. And this is going to be a little change of pace episode. I usually want to just talk about how you write and how you book shows, how you put an album together. I really want to dig into the book, and then maybe we can come back another day and just talk about all the comedy part. But I think this really shows how your early life shaped you as uh, to be a comedian. You had all the right elements, and I just want to work through that because the book was just fascinating to me.
Thank you.
So the first question I ask is what made you want to write the book?
It wasn't that I wanted so much to write the book, I was compelled to write the book.
Uh-huh.
Um, when I started writing the book, um, I I'm giving away a little bit of a what is that called when you they call it nowadays, what do they call that when you give something, up in advance of the episode? Um,
A teaser?
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
A spoiler.
Spoiler.
Um,
There you go.
but, when I started writing this book about 6 years ago, I didn't have a child, I didn't have a son,
Mhm.
and so when I was writing the book, I was very aware that I wanted some kind of legacy. I wanted to be like I think which I think is universal to agree, we wanna be remembered in some way.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that was a kind of a driving force. And so anyway, and I thought I had good stories to tell. When I started writing the book was very different from how it ended up.
Mhm.
I thought I was gonna be the next David Sedaris. I really liked David Sedaris.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, and I thought, oh, it's gonna be a book of humorous stories and essays. And then my editor said, "Well, there's already a David Sedaris, and collections of stories don't usually sell well. And he's the
Mhm.
darling of NPR. So, yeah, he's huge, but you're not starting from there." And I said,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay." So he convinced me to make it um, a memoir, a long, continuous one book, as
Mhm.
opposed to, you know, episodic.
Mhm.
So anyway, I hope that answers your question
Yeah, that
without me
does.
digressing way off.
That does. And I really appreciate it because you really kind of you tore your heart out and put it on the page. And I really enjoyed that. The other thing I really liked was you stuck with your life and you didn't do a whole bunch of name dropping and just being that Hollywood guy. You didn't I guess you didn't glamorize anything, and, that's why I liked it. It was down dirty, it came from inside your head, it came from real life experiences, and that's what really drew me in. It wasn't the typical Hollywood dude memoir.
Yeah. In fact, when I think about it, I only mention a couple of guys, especially in the comedy world,
Yeah.
by name, really.
Yep.
And one was the guy that was instrumental, absolutely, in getting me to Hollywood, and was the reason for me leaving, Drake Sather, who's now passed.
Mhm.
um, and Bob Odenkirk,
Yeah.
who had been a supporter of mine and uh, is one of the oh, is one of the few guys. I shouldn't say few; there are more than a few, but was one of the guys that struck me, who always struck me as a genuinely nice guy, and I
Yeah.
really liked that
Mhm.
about him. And so he ended up getting mentioned because he was, involved. But you're right. I didn't drop a lot of names because I tried to keep the book. It was about my journey, really,
Yeah.
which is
Right.
why some of my friends would say, friends that I've had for 40 years,
Hmm.
well, how come I'm not even mentioned in the book? Or there's one sentence. Well,
Yeah.
because it wasn't about my life, it was about this journey.
Yeah.
And so I kind of tried to keep it focused on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the focus was appreciated because I've read plenty of them where it's really just a name dropping thing. It's,
Oh, yeah.
I hung out with this guy, I hung out with this lady,
Yeah.
and who cares?
Right.
Because if you weren't there, it doesn't mean anything to you. You're just
No.
seeing a name. So yeah, I really appreciated that. So what I want to do is kind of give during our talk a synopsis of the book, just enough so that we do that teaser because I know everybody's going to want to get it anyway. But I wanted to talk about your childhood first a little bit because, golly, that is. You have the ripest breeding ground for a comedian as a child that I think anybody could have. You've got the absentee father, and you've got the dichotomy of living in Ohio and yet your mom is British and all that type of stuff. Can you put that in like a brief synopsis of your childhood and how you came out of that?
Um, well, like most kids, you tend to think you're somewhat normal because you're just a kid growing up.
Hmm.
I was very aware that my mother was very English, very British,
Hmm.
and I considered myself just a Midwest kid.
Hmm.
I think I'm not sure if I mentioned in the book or not, but I remember a time my mother had said, "My God, what are you doing? You have no shoes on." And I said, "Mom, it's summertime. I'm going barefoot." "Well, you look like an urchin like the other children in the neighborhood." And I was like, "Well, yeah." And she goes, "You know better." And I didn't realize till decades later that, that's a little bit of the elitism of the British,
Hmm.
that, well, you should know better. You're more civilized than those people down the street.
Yeah.
And so, not that my mom was a monster or anything else, she wasn't, but that's just kind of a British sensibility,
Uh-huh.
particularly, from her generation. So I was very aware. And I also spoke differently. I enunciated clearly. And guys, would you like to go to the cinema?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, he sounds like a faggot. I mean, so uh I was aware of that kind of dichotomy. My idols, my cinema, I guess, idols were John Wayne, very American, very Midwestern, and
Hmm.
David Niven,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
or Rex Harrison also, and two very different ideas of what men were, but uh, that's who I saw as my role models.
Yeah. And I thought it was neat that I think you got some of your style from David Niven, but you also got it from your stepdad, and you carried that through and to now, really, didn't you?
Yes. It's funny. I tend to think of my stepfather as a really a negative influence.
Hmm.
Um, uh, to give the listener a little bit of backstory, my mother's very English. We were Episcopalian and um, all of that, and my mother remarried when I was young and married into an Orthodox Jewish family, and my stepfather was Jewish, though he wasn't an Orthodox guy. He was uh, he didn't he wasn't he was much more liberal than that. But
Hmm.
but he was very much like he reminded you of Dean Martin. He had
Uh-huh.
that same kind of look, that same lifestyle, and I was in awe of that. He rubbed off on me. I'd never seen men that wore jewelry and that had cigarettes hanging from their mouth all the time and a drink in their hand, and uh and he was in business, and so I equated wheeling and dealing in business with men. And so he rubbed off on me in a lot of ways that weren't necessarily negative. But for example, I've always been into, getting dressed, wearing nice clothes. I've worn a suit on stage for a long time
Mhm.
when a lot of people were never wearing suits. And and I think that's because he was a sharp dresser. That rubbed off on me, and certain things like that, that weren't negatives, but
Mhm.
his lifestyle to a degree, yeah, rubbed
Mhm.
off.
Was there a little bit of him in your Jack Freeman character? Maybe not the dress so much, but some of the mannerisms because
Yes.
I really I got that. Yeah, it seemed like some of those mannerisms and just th the way you spoke and, the how much you thought of yourself. That character was it's after I read about your stepdad, I said, "Oh, there's a little bit of Jack Freeman there." So that's one of the pieces you put into that.
That's funny you say that. I've never thought of that until you just said it. But you're right. The mannerisms
Uh-huh.
from Jack Freeman came from my stepfather.
Yeah.
The sensibility, the attitude of Jack Freeman came from the old school success motivational speakers that were around in the 60s and 70s that I used to read.
Mhm.
All those guys who back then, success was driving a Cadillac, a big wad of cash, and a blonde sitting next to you.
Uh-huh.
That was success. And that's the way those old school guys were. And so Jack Freeman came out of that school. You
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
And one of my favorite times seeing you was when Jack Freeman was your feature, and it was really neat to watch how to look at what was similar and what was different between you and Jack because those mannerisms are something that I remember. It was he was different in the way he stood and in the way his cadence of language was, and just the whole thing was different. And yet, then when you come out as yourself, I was always looking for those similarities. There weren't too many, but there was a few there. I mean, there was enough of you and Jack Freeman that it was a real character that it was believable that this dude actually existed.
Yeah, I really liked doing that character, and he was very popular. And I could have taken him a lot further. I mean, there's guys who have built entire careers on guys like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I've never been like that. I've been like, wow, I did it. Wow, that really worked.
Uh-huh.
Made an impact. People liked him. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
And but uh well, in a way, he, he limited himself because Jack Freeman was a very one-dimensional character
Yeah.
who only had interest or concerns in a few things. And it was
Mhm.
difficult to write. After a while, they just become boxcars. You're writing bits or something, and they all, after a while, start to sound the same, which
Mhm.
I didn't want to do with him. Now, the Jack Freeman, the one man show that I did in Hollywood, The Business of Living, which is where that character started.
Mhm.
Um, Bob Odenkirk directed that stage show, and it was much deeper, more reflective
Mhm.
then. He actually had the ability to reflect, and then
Yeah.
of course he'd say, "What am I thinking? You know, that's a bunch of horse shit. That's not going to
Yeah.
make you any money." you know. But yeah, I loved doing that character.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved it too.
Thank you.
It was funny reading that. I just it all came back. It's funny how things go out of your mind for so long, and it all came back because I think it was maybe, I don't know, 2006 or 2007. I saw you in South Bend do that, and it was, and my friend Marsha Tusky and her husband took me, and for some reason my wife couldn't go, and she was so excited. She loved you, and
Oh,
anytime that she could see you, it was like, Drew Hastings from Bob and Tom, I got to see him. And you are always her favorite, so she's going to love this episode. um let's talk about moving to LA. Let's talk about why you did it and why you got the hell out of there.
um, I was a typical comedian in the late '80s. Came up in that kind of golden age of, you know, uh, the road and comedy club scene that was huge then. And I subscribed to the theory. I didn't realize it then, I do now, very much the country music model. A lot of comedians don't
Yeah.
necessarily come from that model, but
Mm,
I came from the country music model, which is you go out, you do the road relentlessly, you do the same, you do cities over and over and over. You do this for years and you ground swell build an audience,
mhm,
and you build an audience personally. And then you take that and try to hopefully do something with it. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was a feature act for an LA headliner named Drake Sather, who I didn't know at all.
mhm.
Um, and he had said to me that week we were hanging out, he goes, Jesus, Hastings, you're a walking sitcom. You've got to go to LA. You have to. And I'm like, huh? And so I listened to him, and I'd probably been on the road and 48 weeks a year kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, for at that point about 7 years, maybe. This was in like 91 or so, or 92 maybe. And then I moved to LA. I slept on the floor of his apartment in uh in LA, and that was it. And then he kind of introduced me around, and he got me in at the Improv in Hollywood, um, and I was a regular at the Laugh Factory and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So that got you there, and then you tried. Yeah, you tried really hard to get some stuff going, and you were able to do some stuff. What was it that finally told you that you just had to you had to get out of there? It wasn't gonna be good for you?
Well, I was very fortunate. I was there maybe 2 years, and my friend Drake was represented by the biggest manager in Hollywood at the time,
Mhm.
a guy named Jimmy Miller, who is actually Dennis Miller's brother.
Mhm.
Jimmy Miller, he had a company then called Gold Miller, and Jimmy signed me. At the time, his clients were um, Gary. Come on, Gary.
Uh,
He's dead.
oh,
Gary
Shanley.
Shandling,
Yeah.
Judd Apatow, Drake, a few other large names that people would be people would be shocked I can't remember their names, but I can.
Yeah.
But, so, eh, I was with that firm, and I was lucky. I was the lowest guy on the totem pole, but I got a deal. This was in the years NBC was really coming back, and that was the must-see TV,
Uh,
NBC.
yeah.
And Warren Littlefield was the president at the time of NBC. And I got a deal for a sitcom and knew nothing about how that all worked. Drake and I had to write a pilot, which we did.
Mm.
I mean, I guess I can give it away what happened with that show, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
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 So my show, which was called Taking Stock, which was based on a kind of a fledgling tiny little financial channel, which actually in reality ended up becoming a show on CNBC 10 years later.
Yeah.
And it was a very funny show. We wrote it. Everybody thought it would get picked up. Oh my God, Drew, you're getting picked up. Get ready. You're a star, dude.
Uh-huh.
Everybody thought this show would get picked up. So it did not get picked up. And the one show that it was competing against, everybody said, no, nothing's going to happen. It's an ensemble comedy, which they aren't really popular. And frankly, they aren't comics, and they're a bunch of pretty faces. And I said, what's it called? And they said, it's called Friends. And the rest is history. So
Yeah.
I was the guy that lost out to Friends.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, in Hollywood, you're discovered. And then something like that happens, and then you're undiscovered, and you really have to go away and just kind of die for a while. And then at some point, hopefully, you're rediscovered.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do. And but and then I ended up in other sitcom deals.
Mhm.
But you know, I wouldn't admit it at the time to anybody there, but I wasn't enamored with the whole television. See, I didn't watch television. I
Mhm.
think television um, is, for the most part, mindless. Um, people tend to forget why television shows exist. They only exist to sell soap detergent
Mhm.
or allergy medicine.
Uh-huh.
That's the only reason they exist. They don't make a show to say, let's make a show about Tom and Tina who have a wacky life in their apartment. They make the show so that you will watch the commercials and buy the
Mm.
products. It hasn't changed since Procter and Gamble, sponsored shows in the 1950s. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, so I was never a big fan of television, and I viewed making sitcoms, and there's guys out there that will hate me for this because it sounds ungrateful, but I don't mean to be ungrateful. It was glorified factory work to me.
Mhm.
It was sit in the trailer. Okay, Hastings, you're on. I come out, slip in a pile of fake dog poop. Ooh, that damn dog. Okay, cut. That was great. Back to the trailer. And, I just
Yeah.
had no interest in doing that after a while.
Yeah.
And and so I didn't quote want it bad enough.
Mhm.
And so and the worst thing you can be is not ambitious enough in Hollywood.
Right.
And
Yeah. No
so,
doubt.
it was I was destined to end up depressed there and miserable because I didn't realize at the time I was having a slow realization, but it wasn't what I really wanted. But I loved stand up. I loved the art of stand up, and I
Mhm.
loved doing shows on the road and creating new material.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So at this point in your life, and I'll just say it, you're extremely self-centered, and I've gone through that myself. But it seems to me that you didn't have the need to be that big household name. You didn't have to be like what's her name on Friends, Courtney Cox or whatever.
Yeah.
I never watched Friends, so I don't know. But you didn't have to be that in order to feel like you mattered on the earth. And I think that's the difference between you and everybody else that gets into sitcoms, because they have that need. And I'm going to diss a show, but Cedric the Entertainer's on a show that's just awful,
Mm,
and Cedric the Entertainer's great,
mhm.
and this show is just it's terrible. It's like the most cookie cutter stand up, or not stand up, situation comedy that you could ever imagine. And I'm like, why are you wasting your life doing this? Because you're so much better than that. But so I agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying that if somebody gave me a deal that I wouldn't take it, but I can understand why you were deciding to go a different direction.
Yeah, you know, it happened, in my last few years there, but I will always admire immensely Dave Chappelle for
Mm,
walking away from that Comedy Central deal for what was it, 10,000,000 or something at the time,
yeah.
which was huge money.
Mm,
Um, because they wouldn't let him do what he wanted, and wouldn't let him. They wanted to keep him in a box,
yeah.
and do Dave Chappelle. They wouldn't let him kind of stretch beyond that to a degree. It was creative, from what I understand him. Why he walked away from that, and I always really respected him. That would have been very hard to do.
Yeah. 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 That was
I
that
never
was
had
a
the
big
chance to
deal.
walk away from 10,000,000. I would have walked away from a couple thousand, which I
Yeah.
did, but 10,000,000,
Yeah.
that's another story.
Yeah, and that was a big deal for that type of show too, because
Mhm.
artists did get a little bit more control after that. And the only thing is they've reined it back in now, so they don't have control again. So, yeah, so that it changed things for a little bit. So, deciding to leave LA and go back to Ohio, this is about the time you got hooked into Bob and Tom pretty heavy. Can you talk about the Bob and Tom experience, how you got introduced to them and how you started to become a regular and so popular with them?
Yeah, it was around 2000, maybe 3 or 4, and I had been introduced to them and went on the show. I wanna say, I'm not positive, but I'm fairly sure I did Jack Freeman on their show
Mm.
initially, and they were like, "Whoa, who the hell is this? That guy is funny."
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, they'd talk to me off the air, and they'd talk to Drew, but I think I went on and initially impressed them with Jack Freeman, if I recall. And then they wanted me back, and then I started getting popular on that show really quickly, and then, um and then I was just myself on the show. I didn't realize it, I never thought about it, but, they have a long show, especially in those days. They had a long 4-hour format,
Mhm.
and that's a lot of time to fill, and you came in at 6:37 in the morning and sat there till almost 10 AM, and, if you were a comedian that just looked for a way to squeeze your bits in, you ran out of your material in the first show you were on or the first 2 shows, and
Yeah.
dude, if you didn't have a personality and, you couldn't hang,
A little bit of
you were done.
improv. Yeah, a little bit of
That's
improv
right, and,
ability, yeah.
I was fortunate because I didn't really do bits on the show. I just was myself, and I gave opinions. I've always been kind of outspoken, and
Mhm.
I think they found that refreshing somehow. I would just I would give opinions, um, and I was bombastic and, all
Mhm.
that, and So it just worked, and it worked for their show and their format, and I think I was different from most of the guys at the time they had on, and then,
Mhm.
I just seemed to catch on, and I was very fortunate. I owe them a great deal for, they really took me to a much different level, um, that all my touring and somewhat exposure in Hollywood never did.
Mhm.
Um, because at the time, I think they've tightened up a little bit, but um, I mean, they were literally in, I don't even know how many markets. They were in tons of markets. Markets have shrank a little bit simply because radio has.
Yeah.
But um, so that's how that went. And I just, and then I would go on the show, and then eventually they decided to do a Bob and Tom tour. I was
Mhm.
fortunate enough. I was on most of those tours. I headlined kind of a lot of those tours, and that got me from, when I first started on our show, I was a typical, what you call 1800 a week headliner,
Mhm.
and who couldn't name price or anything. And then I suddenly, my prices tripled. And then it was, I could say, I don't want to do the Wednesday night and I don't want to do the Sunday night. I just want to come in and do Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Mhm.
And, because that's what we're trying to achieve usually.
Yeah.
And, and so I was able to do that. And I was making a lot more money, and it was just, um, it really did a lot for me, that show.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder how you became one of the most popular comedians on there because you were so different from everybody else? What's the guy's name?
Oh, Baker. Yeah.
Donnie Baker, I think he was on, those tours with you. Bob Zaney's kind of in the same, thing, but he's still pretty different from you. I mean, you were a little bit more intellectual and a little bit more, I guess, you challenged people a little bit when you're on stage, and, your crowd work was a little bit more, it had a little bit more of an edge to it, and you weren't afraid to speak your mind. So you were really different from that. Do you ever wonder how you were somebody who really caught on with them?
No, but see, I when I was on their show, and to a large degree, when I'm on stage, I don't think of myself as a comedian.
Mhm.
I think of myself as, well, I'm a guy who's up here talking, and you're not allowed to talk, and I am. And I have a nonstop one-sided conversation going on. And so it made sense to me that I was working on the Bob and Tom show, that was working, because I I didn't see me as, "I gotta do a bit. Whoa, it's been 2 minutes. I gotta get a punchline going."
Mhm.
I never saw me like that.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate, their show has changed to a degree. You had more leeway then, more time to get a story out, to do something. Now their format is much more tightened up,
Mhm.
and, it's much more sound bites.
Mhm. Right.
But and I don't fault them for that. I mean, that's the way a lot of content and media has gone. Um, but, yeah, so, I guess that's how did I answer the question? I'm
Yeah,
not
you
sure.
did. You did very
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Um,
So,
but
a
let me
little
go
bit
back for a second. I wanna just
go ahead.
address one thing. You had said that my stuff was, a little intellectual, or that, was kinda smart. Well, you know, I really, in a way, disagree with that to a degree, because, I remember in Los Angeles, and they're, of course, very just condescending, but I remember agents and people in the business saying, your material is so intelligent and so bright. How in God's name did you go over in the Midwest? And I would look at them very surprised and I'd say, well, I was born and raised in the Midwest. I started stand up in the Midwest in front of Midwest audiences,
Mhm.
and I am Midwest. So what I am a product of the Midwest. So if you think for some reason that I'm smart or somehow intellectual, then you have to say that about a lot of people in the Midwest.
Uh-huh.
And I have always, and I think there are comedians who are maybe listening to this who will agree, and maybe, but I think it's sometimes easy, and maybe there's a number of comedians, or maybe it's a school of thought that tend to treat audience as you gotta dumb it down for them. You gotta kind of play down for them. I never in a million years considered talked down to my audience. I always considered that they would have the same, be up on the same issues as me.
Mhm.
Um, and if they didn't, I would say things in a way that, oh, I see what he means.
Yeah.
They may not know when I'm making a reference to Gregor Mendel and genetics,
Mhm.
who Gregor Mendel was, but oh, yeah, Gregor Mendel, he must be like a genetics historic guy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't. I've never felt the need that you need to somehow spoon feed an audience.
Right, right.
And I
And there
think,
was
and you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen comedians that play to the lowest common. That's called the lowest common
yeah.
denominator. And
Yeah.
I just have never felt that you have to do that.
Oh yeah, I still do open mics, and I go up after 6 guys that have eating ass jokes every
Yeah.
time. So it's just I introduce myself as a palate cleanser, because I'm not going to do one of those. So yeah, I totally understand. I always thought that was just it was a little bit different, and you had that Midwest sensibility, and yet you also were not playing the lowest common denominator, and you were bringing up things that mattered during your set, and it was just a little bit different than most of the Bob and Tom folks that came through, where a lot of them were character driven, and a lot of them were a little bit more two dimensional and funny, still funny. I'm not saying they weren't funny. Everybody has their own journey on comedy, but you were just kind of different. You were a little bit different than them, and yet you rose to the top and ended up doing very well with them. So I was impressed with that, and I was impressed with the Midwest because we're not all that stupid.
No,
You know?
not at all.
Yeah, and I'm finding the same thing in the South. Guess what? They're not all that stupid.
That's right.
It's just some of the things that you've been taught are not exactly what you think they are. A little bit off topic, but you know, you're a tall drink of water, Drew. And I am also a tall gentleman, and we are not super wide, so we're a little bit more on the slender side. And as you know, you're a fancy man, and you can get your stuff tailored and everything made perfectly for your body. But a regular Joe like me, if I want to say take my wife to an REO Speedwagon concert and look good, it's very hard for me to do that, because if I walk into a big and tall shop, the problem is it's all big and it
Right.
does not fit me correctly. I found a place called American Tall that might even work for you. What's your inseam? About 36, 38?
Yeah, actually now I'm a 38,
There you
38, but
go.
yeah.
Okay.
And
So
I'm
we're
always stuff that's tall, that's decent. It's very hard. It's hard
yes.
to find.
So these guys came about, and I've been ordering from 'em for about 2 years, and, you and I fit in the same category except for I'm large tall, and I think you're large extra tall. That extra inch puts you into the extra tall. And, I have bought pants from them, I have bought shirts from them, I have bought sweatpants, I bought everything from 'em, and they fit absolutely wonderfully. It's one of the best places I can think of a tall all the way up to 7'1". That's
Wow.
how tall they go, and, for a tall person who wants to look fashionable and not get that extra large shirt when they don't need it, and, actually look decent when they go out. So, if you ever wanna check out a place, if you're slumming it sometime and you just want some clothes that fit and that don't have to be tailored, I highly recommend you check out American Tall. They are all over the internet, real easy to order from, and very good product.
I will check them out, but I will tell you, if you're kind of trying to hype this company a little bit, it's not good to say, Drew, if you're out slumming for a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
you're
but no,
right.
I would be happy to check them out. Are they brick and mortar or online only? Are they both?
I
What are
think
they?
they're online only.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, and, the nice thing is everything fits. You know how if you order online, you have to order an extra large from this shop and a large from this and a medium. All their
Yes.
stuff has a pretty, consistent sizing, so it's really great, and American Tall, if you're listening to this, I would love to have you as a sponsor because I think we're a perfect fit.
That's right. You know what? And tell them, you know what? We want people to go out, slum their way to the top of the American Tall.
Oh, so let's get right into Hillsboro, and what brought you to Hillsboro. So can you just briefly tell that story? I don't want everybody. I don't want the whole story out there because I want people to read the book. But I think this is a time in your life. It was such a turning point for you that I think we need to discuss it.
Um, I was in major depression in Hollywood. Um, if anybody here is listening who knows Hollywood at all, I lived at the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and Curson Avenue, right on Hollywood Boulevard. And I was majorly depressed. I was actually getting work. I was
Mhm,
getting work in LA, sitcom little roles and pilots, stuff like that. But I was not happy at all. I'd started flying out. I was still flying out all the time and doing shows in the Midwest,
mhm,
which was my strong suit was the Midwest. And I just decided, you know what? I'm getting out of here. I want to jumpstart my creativity. I was in a real slump. I want to jumpstart my creativity. How do I do that? I want to do something. I want to move. I want to be somewhere I've never been before. What would that be? Rural. Go rural. And I literally packed my stuff up, drove to Ohio, put all of my stuff in one of those public storage, you store it, you lock it places,
uh-huh,
and then drove around like this for 3 months all over Southern Ohio looking for where I wanted to settle.
uh-huh,
And and then one day was in a diner in Hillsboro and was reading the paper, and there was a little farm for sale, and I was like, I could maybe afford that, and the rest was history. And that's how I ended up there.
mhm,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite stories in the book is the fact that you couldn't quit smoking cigarettes to save your life, and, your move to Hillsboro finally got that done. Can you tell me that story real quick?
So a little backstory: I'd smoked, oh my god, since I was 16. Um, and after about 30 years, I smoked 40 years. At
Mhm,
about when I'd been smoking 30 years, I really wanted to quit. And I'd spent thousands on trying to quit with hypnosis, Chantix, acupuncture, you name it, and all of it repeated over and over again.
Mm.
Books and tapes, God knows what, and was not able to quit. So I'm in Hillsboro. I've been there maybe, I don't know, 6 months or so. And the guy who lived across the street from me, lived in a mobile home across the road and, uh, real kind of, rural Appalachian
Mhm.
and, young guy, half my age. He must have been about 26. I was about 52.
Mhm.
And we had been fighting about feuding about something. And I'm standing in my driveway having a cigarette, and he's coming at me. He leaves his trailer, he comes up, he's coming over the road, and he's taking off his shirt. "You mother, I'm gonna kick your fucking ass." And, and he's cut and thin. He was work construction, and I'm like, "Whoa, if this dude gets me down on the ground, I'm a dead man."
Yeah.
And I will never forget this as long as I live. I flicked my cigarette away. I could still see it going end over end, slow motion. And I said to myself, that was my last cigarette.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to get my lungs back and I'm going to kick that hillbilly's ass. And I don't know what it was in his, if he saw something in my eyes. I don't know if he decided, well, in the country, if you come on another person's property, uninvited, that's they can pretty much do anything to you,
Yeah.
shoot you, whatever. I don't know if he decided not to come up onto the property or he saw the look in my eyes, but for whatever reason, he stopped and mumbled to himself and grumbled and turned around and went back. And I never had another cigarette again. I mean, I never even thought about it. It was
Uh-huh.
almost a religious experience.
Yeah.
And I will never forget that, and I still marvel that that's how I quit, and
Yeah.
to this day, I thank that guy. He still lives in a trailer across the road from my farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny, and that was one of the
His
it
name is
was one.
Sean, by the way.
Yeah.
He's one of 3 Seans on the road.
Alright.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you guys friends now?
Yeah, friends enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
we go up and down, depends.
Yeah. As long as the light isn't just shining right in the window,
That's
I
right.
guess he's okay.
That's right.
That was one of the moments I was reading that, I don't know, it was like midnight or something like that, and I read that and I'm like, "Holy shit, that's how he quit." 'Cause I quit in similar fashion because I started when I was 12 and I was dating who ended up being my wife, and she said, "You know, I really don't like you smoking." So I did the same thing. I crumpled up my pack, put it away, never smoked another one. It was real
Wow.
easy. But I was in love, so,
That's right.
that helped. So one of the really recurring themes during the beginning of the book was your depression and the fact that you couldn't get out of it. So there was periods of times where you played video games all day and all night, and basically all you did was work and sleep and do drugs and video games and stuff like that. And another uh, defining moment for you when you went to Hillsborough and started working on the farm. Something happened. Can you talk about how that helped the depression aspect?
Yeah. So when I got to the farm, it was immediately a new project. It was a whole different lifestyle. Um, and for the first time, oh my gosh, since I was in my early 20s, I had physical labor to do, or that had to be done, that needed to be done.
Mhm.
And I started doing it, and I got ambitious, and I would dig fence posts and put in fence posts for fencing, and I would clear brush, and I would cut down trees, and I would fix the barn, and I would do all this stuff. And I noticed after about a year, one day, I looked up and I said, wow, I'm not really depressed anymore. I really look forward to getting up every day and doing this. And it occurred to me because I'd been in therapy back in LA, seen a therapist off and on for a long time. All I really needed to do was chores.
Mhm.
And that is so true in life. It's
It
easy
is.
for us to laugh about it, but that is so true. That's a simplistic way to say it. All I needed to do was chores, but that's so true
Yeah.
in life. Now, some people can say exercise, daily regimen of exercise. Some people can say but any activity that engages you, gets you passionate, gets you interested, you could substitute for chores.
Right.
But that's what it was. I had
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
You need
And
purpose.
and the thing I always say is folks in the 1800s didn't need therapists or didn't have
Mhm.
depression because they didn't have time because they had to do things to keep themselves alive. And now
That's right.
we've got all this great stuff that makes our lives more comfortable and more easy, and
Yeah,
yet we feel unfulfilled because we are not doing anything.
yes,
And that's where it comes from. And I suffer the same thing. And you have to find something that makes you passionate, otherwise it'll just eat you up. And
that's right.
I that was really I that was a I really liked that part of the
Hmm,
book. That was another one that just really kind of enamored me to you as a person, not just a comedian. So I really enjoyed that.
thank you.
Um,
Well, I also believe that you know, which is probably why I'm so self-deprecating, whether it's in the book or on stage, but I believe we are our own worst enemies,
mhm,
always. And it's a matter of getting over that.
mhm,
And hence, that's why things like the chores,
mhm.
it's about, yeah, purpose. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, purpose always helps. I wanna, touch on we've been talking for a while now, but I wanna touch on the whole, mayor thing, uh, how you got into it and why you did it. I wanna leave a little bit for the readers, but, very interesting, and understanding that part was almost a civics lesson on how, government really works, small town government really works, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because last night I'm putting together, how a lot of memoirs, a lot of books have a section of photographs in them.
Uh-huh.
Here's him at an early age. Here's him in the one thing he was doing. Here's him.
Yeah.
I didn't put photographs in the book. I didn't want that to be a distraction. And what I did was something different. I put in the very front of the book, I put to view a photo gallery
Mhm.
of pictures related to this book. Go to Drew Hastings memoir thing
Mhm.
gallery. And it's not up yet, but I was working on it last night. And I was getting mayoral pictures together, and I was looking at pictures when I became mayor, and I wasn't flabbergasted, but I was blown away at how I didn't realize at the time how different I looked. I mean, you're talking big, spiky hair. I mean,
Uh-huh.
almost Johnny Depp-like. I mean,
Yeah.
and I wore black all the time, and so I I so can see why people either liked me or did not like me at all.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wow, I really had no idea how unlikely I was.
Mhm.
So I had been, I had conned my best friend, who had been my best friend of 40 years, who was living in Southern California, way down in Orange County, running an assisted living center. And I conned him into moving to Hillsboro. Bob, "Oh, what a cool town. Oh, you'll love it here. You've got to come on back to Midwest." He was from Ohio too originally.
Uh-huh.
And so he moved back, and, we were walking around uptown Hillsboro, which suffered from a lot of the things that Midwest small towns suffer.
Mhm.
With the rise of Walmarts and with the rise of the big box stores and everything else, the little small town downtown died. Everything moved out to by the Walmart. You know how that all went.
Mhm.
And so our uptown was hurting and it was grimy and neglected. And I'd said to him, Jesus, man, who the hell runs this town? God, I could do better than this. And he said, well, why don't you? And I thought about it. Yeah, okay. So I ended up running for mayor. Or as I like to say it, well, I was used to disappointing people on an individual basis, and I wanted to try to expand on that effort. Um, so I was really passionate about some things, and I went around and I would talk to people. What's important to you? What's important to you? What's wrong with this town? What's wrong? And I took the number one and two things, three things that I heard, and I said, well, that's what I'll fix, or that's what I'll work on. One was our fire department, who that's a whole nother story, but and it's in the book, but
Mhm.
um, and I ended up solving the problem, but only solved the problem because I had no idea that you could not solve it.
Mhm.
And I was too naive and ignorant to know that you can't solve that problem. And I did, but only because I didn't know I couldn't.
Mhm.
But there was that. There was economic development and infrastructure. And so I ended up winning in, I guess, technically a landslide. And then I just rolled up my sleeves. Now I was naive enough to think, oh, this isn't going to really affect my comedy career. I mean, I go in the mayor's office 3, 4 days a week, and then I fly out and I go do Bob and Tom tours. Um, the problem was, like anything I get involved with, like the farm
Mhm.
or anything else, I immerse myself in it and I give it 110%. Well, I knew nothing about mayoring, municipalities, Ohio Revised Code,
Mhm.
um, infrastructure. And so I started reading up on it and reading up on it and going to workshops and going to conferences. And I was in the office 80, 90 hours a week. And it did affect my comedy career because I wasn't writing new material.
Mhm.
I was writing material, but now it was called policy.
Yeah.
And and I was writing speeches instead of comedic rants.
Mhm.
And so that's what happened. Um, and then I'm really glad I was mayor. I was mayor for 2 terms, and I think made a big difference. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. But it cost me. It was hard on me. It was hard on
Mhm.
me mentally, very hard on me, just from some stuff that happened, in the book.
Yeah.
Um, and and it affected my comedy career. It definitely hurt my comedy career. I didn't mind that so much because I was doing something else that
Mhm.
was kind of bigger than me, I guess. And I'd never done anything for anybody else. Um, I'd always been kind of me oriented. Well, I was single. I didn't have children.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there to be other than me oriented, particularly if you're a comedian or, so you know what I mean? It's very
Yeah.
easy to default to, oh, me.
So I'm going to interrupt you for a
Yeah,
second. One of
that's
my
okay.
favorite quotes from the book is the idea of doing something for a cause bigger than me was, well, ludicrous. What possible cause could be bigger than me?
Yeah.
And it's I
Is that
just
in the book?
love that. Yeah, that's in the book, and I just loved how you came out of that. Uh, you went into it being a more inward facing type person to being a completely outward facing type person and seeing what was going on around you. I really love that part.
Thank you. Well, a lot of people will relate to this, and I'm not sure who all listens to your show, if there's a lot of other comedians, if it's a lot of the general public who, but there are people will relate to this, I think. Especially if you're an urban person, you live in a city. When you live in a city, see, I had no sense of community. I had no
Mhm.
idea what a sense of community was.
Yeah.
I'd always lived in a city, and, you know, as I said, in Los Angeles, if somebody died in your apartment building, "Oh, did you hear that the old lady up there on 5th floor died?" I didn't even know her name.
Mhm.
"Oh, hey, you remember that hippie dude that lived down the hall from us? Schaefer? Yeah, he died, man." Or, "Oh, the guy down in the basement apartment got in a big car wreck. Did you hear about that?" But it was all very anonymous. You didn't have a
Mhm.
connection when you live in a city, really,
Mhm.
um, per se. And when I moved to Hillsboro, you couldn't help but get a sense of community because the people that are down the street from you, if Mrs. McPherson died, wow, well, I knew her son. Her son runs a hardware store, and her grandson works up here at the gas station where I get pop. And
Mhm.
there's just a connection, and then by extension, you end up being part of a community, and
Mhm.
you can't help but care, really, in a small
Mhm.
town. I so get small towns now. I mean, not that
Yeah.
they don't have their downsides,
Yeah.
but, um, but there's a lot of great things about small towns.
Mhm.
And so uh, that's where a part of that thing with the mayoring came, how I got out of myself,
Mhm.
and into something a little bit bigger than me. Yeah.
Yeah. So that story is so compelling, and if nothing else, just get the book to read through that, especially if you are a idealist, naive person like Drew was, and you want to get into city government because you'll learn a few things, and
Yeah.
that it was just excellent. Um, one of the things I want to end with because I want to be respectful of your time is
No, I'm good. Whatever you
okay,
want to believe me, I got
okay,
time.
okay, cool. Well, let's talk about when you went on Jay Leno and got the standing O, and then went back and had Robin Williams in your court, and something happened.
Yeah. Well, I was on Leno the first time. I don't even remember the year. Um, a friend of mine, Ross Mark, was the talent booker at the time. And he liked me, liked my material, and he got me on the Tonight Show the first time. And I got a standing in fact, no, I'll tell you when it was. I was the first comedian on the show after 9/11.
Oh, okay,
That's what it was. I forgot
okay.
that because I remember people were all very nervous. Uh, "Ooh, is America ready to laugh again?
Hmm.
Ooh." And whether I got a standing ovation because my set was brilliant or whether I got a standing ovation because people were just so grateful to be laughing
Yeah.
again. I don't know. I think it's the latter, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, it's kinda like the pandemic.
Yeah.
I did a show the other night, one of the first shows in almost 2 years,
Mm.
and I noticed the audience seemed very appreciative. I don't know
Yeah.
how I knew that
Yeah.
was coming across, but I did. And I thought, I know why this show is going well. I'm stumbling through material. I'm trying to remember half of it. They're just glad to be out and laughing and getting
Yeah.
out again. And
Yeah.
so, and that's probably the same reason I got the standing O. after
Yeah.
9/11. But anyway, so I was on the show. Fast forward 7 years later, um, I get elected as mayor. I get a call the very next day after I've won the election. Literally Hollywood calling.
Yeah.
Um, and it was Ross Mark. "Hey, Drew, Jay wants you to do the show." "He does?" And he said, "Yeah, this whole mayor thing." And so, I was pretty somewhat savvy by then. I said, "Well, I don't want to have to do a set and then come over and do the couch. Can I just come over and do the couch? Because,
Uh-huh.
that's got a lot more cachet. If
Yeah.
you just come out and do the couch, oh my gosh, he's like Pierce Brosnan or David
Yeah.
Niven or somebody. He just
Yeah.
comes out like an author." And so I came out and did the couch. And Jay holds up a copy of the Hillsborough newspaper that says, "Here's Drew," which
Yeah.
is how the headline went. They were
Yeah.
going to take off on my career. And yeah, so I understand you're mayor now. And we're talking along. And Robin Williams, let me back up for a second. So Robin Williams had been backstage and had come into the green room. And Robin Williams says to me, "Hey, I really like your stuff, man. I think you're really funny." And like most people would, would have been my much smaller stature, I thought, "Yeah, right. He's just saying that. He doesn't know my material."
Mhm.
And then he starts naming bits verbatim from my comedy special that had just come out just a couple of years before.
Mhm.
And I'm like, son of a gun, he did watch my special. And I was, wow, well, thank you. So we hit it off. So he goes out and does his segment. And instead of leaving, getting up and leaving and being long gone in his car, he decides to stick around for my segment to support me.
Uh-huh.
And this is a big deal. Robin Williams is going to stick around for me. So Robin Williams is sitting there next to me. And you can see this if you ever pull up the show or stills. I have stills posted on one of my sites.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm out there and Jay's talking to me about, "Yeah, so you're around for mayor. And boy, tell us about that and this and that." And at one point, and Robin's laughing at stuff over here next to me and laughing at
Mhm.
stuff I'm saying. And Jay then says, "So I understand you had to run as a Republican to win." And I looked at him kind of funny and I said, "Well, yeah, Jay, I am a Republican." And Jay got a little taken aback.
Yeah.
Robin got unbelievably silent. And after that, Robin never laughed at anything I
Yeah.
said. He was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know I'd been supporting the Antichrist all this time." And and it was, I didn't care I'm like, I'm who I am, whatever. And
Mhm.
so that was very that was very funny. But I'll tell you what I'm really proud of, and that's really been indicative of my life. I'm one of the only people, I believe, who's ever done the Tonight Show 2 separate times for 2 completely different careers.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that. That's a little asterisk kind of fact, whatever. But
Yeah.
that means a lot,
Uh-huh.
because I've kind of had a varied life and, you know, anyway.
Yeah. That I really enjoyed that story. So the clip is on YouTube, so it's really easy to
Is it?
watch that. Yeah, and it's there and all the way through, and you can see when Robin checks out. And yeah, it's really neat because we talked a little bit before we did the interview last week, and so I had to look it up, and it's there. Yeah, it's
Wow.
very very easy to see. Yeah.
Huh.
So how has having a child changed your life?
Oh, man. I don't hardly even know how to answer that because it's gonna sound so maudlin and so, I don't know, stereotypical. I will tell you this. I didn't even know. I had no idea what love was
Mhm.
until I had him.
Mhm.
No idea.
Yeah.
Um, I thought about it this morning. It was really upsetting. And parents, I guess will relate to this. I no sooner had my son, and he is just the world to me. And I love him so much, but immediately, not long after he came in the world, I was also terrified. I mean, and I'm talking terrified, and I
Yeah.
still am every day.
Mhm.
This morning, I was driving down the road daydreaming, and I had this vision of something happened to him running out into the road.
Mhm.
Oh God. And I'm like, God, quit it, Drew. God damn it, quit it. Don't even think something like that. And I thought about it and I thought, that's the yang to the yin. That's
It
what
is.
happens when you have something in your life like a child that you love so much. How do you not sometimes have those thoughts? Because the most terrifying thing in the world is that could be taken away from you,
Yes.
you know?
Yep.
And,
The
God, it just gets me really upset to even think
Yeah.
about that.
I,
But it changed me, well, I'll tell you this, and I'm sure, parents have said this a million times. After you have him, there is nothing you do in your life where he isn't really the consideration,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's one thing I'll tell you is, my kids are grown and married, and I have grandkids, and that feeling never goes away. It
Wow.
you
Yeah.
it it and it is so detrimental to go to worst case scenario, but you always, for some reason, whenever a situation pops up, like, when my daughter was giving birth and stuff like that, you always think about, "Oh, what could happen?"
Yeah,
And
right.
it's terrible, but it's still worth it. That feeling is, I guess, it makes you know you're alive and that you love something. So I
Mhm.
I will tell you, it never goes away.
Yeah.
It's with you all the time. Uh, Somebody commented. I want to speak to it because backyard politics, said it's refreshing to know that there are Republicans in the comedy business. And first off, I'll tell you, there's more than you think. That a lot of them are extremely quiet about it. But second off, I want to let you know that this show is about comedy and the people in comedy, and I will never have tell somebody they can't be on the show because of their politics or anything that is considered controversial, because
Mm.
I don't think that should be controversial. So thanks for that comment. Backyard politics. I don't know who you are, but thanks for watching and thank you for saying that. I would say if Drew and I got together and talked about what we believed in and stuff like that, we are probably pretty far apart in a lot of things. But we're both human beings, and we are we've got some commonality, and we all have commonality. So let's look for that,
Yeah.
folks, instead of what makes us different, and maybe have a little bit better country because of it. That soapbox done. Uh, but yeah, I do want to say that this book really did it, sucked me in, and every part of it resonated with me because I've been in a small town, and actually a small town that has a really bloated fire department. So I really understand what you went through there. And this book took you on a journey, and I journey is such a cliche, but it really took you on a journey, and I feel like I understand you as a person, and I feel like it allowed me to reflect on myself quite a bit. So I really appreciate this book, Drew.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. This book, was arguably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because
Mhm.
um it was just very hard. I'll tell you a
Mhm.
quick story. Col- I was in Columbus, Indiana, and I had done a stand-up show about 6 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And after the show, I'm signing some autographs, and this young kid comes up to me. He must be 25, and he comes up to me and goes, "Hi, Mr. Hastings. Just thought I'd stop by and say hi, and I just wanted to see what you've been up to." And I kind of hardly look up, and I say, "Oh, I've been writing a book." And he says, "Yeah, that's what you told me the last time I asked you 5 years ago." I almost vomited. I was so mortified. I went home that night. I got up the next day and I made a decision. And I said, I'm not getting up from this desk. And I sat behind that desk for the next 4 years writing this book. So I
Uh-huh.
thanked that kid, whoever the hell he was in Columbus, Indiana. That's what got me, because I'd been on this hamster wheel
Yeah.
of writing and cutting and pasting, trying to find, thinking I was cutting and pasting my way to a meaningful book, and no, and it was just going in circles. And looking back, the book would have never come out. I'd still be in the same place. He
Yeah.
got me off center. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I'm so
want to go
glad
back real quick, if that's okay
go
with
ahead.
you,
Yeah, yeah.
on the conservative thing in comedy. And I know there are comedians out here who will vehemently disagree with this. But there's an argument that, well, the most simplistic argument, which is really kind of asinine. Well, the reason there's no conservatives in comedy is that conservatives aren't funny. Well, that's BS. You know that.
Mhm.
And then there are other arguments that, well, people that are more liberal, more left leaning are more creative types. And so they tend to head into comedy much more frequently. And there may be a little truth to that, but I'm not even sure that's true. I think that when when a comedian goes into stand-up comedy, I think we all start out very pure. We just want to be on stage. We have a joy about us. We just want to be funny. We want to just write stuff and make an audience laugh. We aren't thinking left, right. We don't, that none of that plays
Mhm.
into anything.
Right.
We just want to be funny. And I think, and I'm only going to quote my case, because that's all I can with any authority.
Mhm.
But I think that the reason that you tend not to see, at least conservative comedians that are apparent there, is because as you journey through the world of stand-up comedy over the years, you're pressured in either subtle or not so subtle ways, or innuendo, to go kind of the more liberal route. And I'll cite like an example. I can remember working with headliners, and when you're young and this, you take almost everything the headliner says as gospel.
Mhm.
Oh, never wear sequins on stage. Audiences will hate you. Yeah. Oh, never wear sequins. But you would have a big headliner who would be you're working with from LA, and he says, I don't know what that bit you were doing about being for the death penalty was, but man, that's not going to get you very far. You need to drop that kind of stuff. Oh, well, maybe I do. And I was just that was just uh, I was just throwing that as an example, but
Mhm.
I think those kinds of things happen, and they happen periodically, and that ends up shaping you to a degree
Mhm.
in stand up. I know when I used to do sets, when you're going to do a late night show, or when you're going to do a stand up set on a late night show, they come into the club, the people that the producers and stuff, and they watch you do a set, and they'll watch you do a 15-minute set, and then they kind of willow things down, and um they would say something to you like, "Oh, I love this bit, and I love that thing you're opening with. I'm not sure I like that that bit where you say that about Obama. I don't think that works. I think
Mhm.
everybody'd be happy if you just drop that bit." And so you drop the bit because you want to do that show.
Mhm.
But that's in a way, I think, how you get shaped. In other words, it's easier for you to be allowed to succeed if you kind of quote toe the party line
Right. Right.
than not.
Yeah.
And I know there are people out there who will say, "Well, that wasn't my experience," or this or that, but that was my experience, and I really think that there is some truth to that. Um, um, I definitely paid the price for opening my mouth being a conservative
Mhm.
when I was in Hollywood. I didn't know at the time. I was naive. Um, you don't want to go on rants about the Disneyfication of homosexuality and then think that somebody isn't going to not like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there, and you could tell me I'm full of crap. That's all right.
Well,
I
and if everything was a true meritocracy, then there would be an equal amount
Yeah, yeah.
of conservative comedians, but that's not what it is. It's politics are different than conservative and liberal. There's a lot of
That's
different
right.
types of politics, but yeah,
That's
yeah,
true. And there's funny. I mean, to me, ultimately, the thing I subscribe to that's true across the board, at least for me, only the truth is funny.
yeah,
That's the basis under everything.
yeah, yeah,
And almost all comedy comes from pain,
hmm,
ultimately.
yeah.
And I believe those two things. Other than that, you know, it's all up in the air. Yeah.
100% agree with you on that. Well, this has been great, Drew. I really, like I said, I will beat the drum for your book for until you get to be a bestseller, because this is just fantastic. I'm going to pop a picture of it up again real quick. This is what you're going to see when you go to Amazon and pre-order, or this is going to be the audio. If you're listening to the audio version, it's out today, so make sure you
The
pick
audio
it up.
version.
Yeah, the audio version of my podcast.
Oh,
So if you're listening to the audio version of Behind the Bits, it's out on the day of release. So make sure that you, and there will be in the show notes, there will be a link to it. Go get it. And I would, if you want to, try to buy it from a local bookstore if you
mm-hmm.
can, rather than Amazon. But if you really like Kindle like I do, buy it from a local bookstore and get the Kindle versions. I do that a lot too. So whatever you want to do, support local business if you can. If not, get it on Amazon so you support Drew. It's a good book, and I guarantee if you're a comedian, if you're a human being, or you're a politician, you're going to enjoy it. So thanks a lot, Drew. This has been a really, really good talk, and like I said, the book did inspire me.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I had a really good time today. It made me, it was thought provoking. And you do a great cast. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching.